Just recently, I had the opportunity to play Cyberpunk 2077 multiplayer. No, not that multiplayer that CDPR was planning to add, but instead a Cyberpunk 2077 multiplayer mod. This is known as CyberMP. It's being developed by just one dev, but even despite that, this has been showing some incredible promise. And let me tell you, my experience playing this one absolutely blew me away, because it just didn't feel all that buggy. We were doing multi-person races, getting into full-fledged death matches with 15 different people from all over the world, as well as all kinds of other open world multiplayer antics, and things here worked shockingly well. And I think this gameplay proves that Cyberpunk 2077 multiplayer is going to be a thing in our future. The progress that this mod has already made is absolutely immense. The setup for this one was pretty simple. I literally installed just one mod for Cyberpunk, and then when launching the game, it would put you into a multiplayer lobby. For this test, there was just one lobby set up. And from there, I was connected to a server with 10 to 20 other people, and we had the entirety of Night City to experience and explore. One of the first things to really surprise me was just how good the sync was. That being how well player movements were actually synced up between one player to another, how well I could see other people moving. In this build, the CyberMP player animations weren't active, so everyone was just sliding around. But even despite that, I am playing with other people from all over the world, and these movements are still incredibly smooth. I basically saw no issues with lag or players teleporting around, things that are very common in other multiplayer games, especially around launch with problems. But in this fan-made Cyberpunk mod, we were doing 15-person death matches with all kinds of craziness happening around us, and the sync was almost perfect. This truly was at scale. A few times over the 2-day playtest, we would all go to one location and basically just have chaos let loose. In this version of the mod, death was temporary. You would die, but basically just instantly respawn in place. And as you can imagine, as you gather a bunch of Cyberpunk players into one big group, somebody throws a grenade and then a battle breaks out. But here too, things worked surprisingly well. You had grenade spam, tons of different types of weapons being used, and even perks being used, but the lag was overall minimal. Perks did work in this build, and you could use them, but one of the big problems is there's no animations. Cyberpunk 2077 doesn't have a third-person perspective, so there really aren't third-person animations for many of the things you could do. They're only first-person animations, because that's all you'll ever see. It's not like you see enemies sliding around all that often. Animations definitely are one of the lingering hurdles with this mod, but the important takeaway I had from these little TDM sessions was just how good it felt. Like, yeah, there aren't animations and you respawn in place, so it looks weird as you're getting into these little battles, but functionality-wise, I felt like my hits were registering where they should. It's not like you had to lead your targets or had any issues with netcode. Everything felt super solid on that front, and I think you could totally play Cyberpunk 2077 Deathmatch mode right now, especially when you consider some of the newer builds of CyberMP actually do include player animations. That's massive, and we're going to be talking a bit more about that later on in this video. But the gameplay right here is from 19 players all over the world. This would only be better if you're actually playing with nearby friends. The core idea, and I think goal with CyberMP, is to create GTA Online-esque servers. So a ton of server-side functionality has already been implemented into this mod. There's a full kill feed, and you could always see how many players were online at any given time, but also a fully functional chat. You could talk to everyone else on the server, but also use a wide variety of console commands. So you could teleport to other players. This was incredibly handy for getting around Night City, because we did have the entirety of Night City at our disposal, but even some custom stuff like spawning in vehicles was also possible here. Because truly, where I had the most fun in my initial tests of Cyberpunk multiplayer was when vehicles were in play. The sync here was almost more impressive to me. You're moving at much higher speeds in vehicles, so there definitely is more disconnect compared to on foot, but even still, this is relatively minor. Like, I've had this amount of desync in Forza. In this area, I'm making fairly fast and sharp maneuvers as I follow this other player, but the server kept up. I was still easily able to follow them, and it's not like this looks unrecognizable. It just looks like two people playing Cyberpunk. And some of the most fun you could have in Night City is with races. You would get the entire server together, decide on a finish line somewhere on the map, and all of us would set a waypoint there and then go. The launches of these were often utter chaos, with cars smashing around as well as into each other, but honestly, this race isn't even that far off as to how this goes in single-player Cyberpunk 2077 right now. And in one of the races, we all accidentally started driving in the wrong direction. Yeah, somehow nobody realized that all of us were going the wrong way. At higher speeds, like when literally hitting the top speed of the fastest car in the game, some of the vehicle sync issues become a lot more noticeable, but I still found this to be very functional, and across my 2 days we ran several large-scale races, and you could competently do these from start to finish even on this early build of the mod. I was even having quite a bit of success just bumping cars out of my way, which honestly pretty shocked that actually worked. And in CyberMP, you could even just ride in the passenger seat. Several times I jumped into the passenger seat of some other player's car and was able to just cruise around with them, and things worked flawlessly. Although, with all of that in mind, things definitely aren't perfect on this earlier test build that I was playing. The actual point of this test was to gauge server stability with a large number of players all connecting, but also to test crashing. Day 1 of this 2-day test, I was crashing constantly. But thankfully, this dev was collecting feedback from all of the testers and implemented several fixes in between day 1 and day 2, and when it came to the day 2 of testing, I barely crashed on day 2. And reportedly, I still had some of the most crashes of anyone, so I'm almost like the extreme bad version of what could happen. And honestly, on that day 2 test, I was crashing less than I have with some AAA game launches. And mind you, I was playing on a version of this that is now several months old, so only further improvements have been implemented. Some of the interactions in the now online world also get a bit wonky though. You could break things and they would regenerate almost immediately, which could sometimes lead to odd interactions. During my test, NPCs were disabled, but you could still hear them, which was incredibly horrifying, as well as all of the vehicles on the server were roughly the same speed. And in my opinion, outside of some of those day 1 crashing issues, which were literally resolved by day 2, I was seriously impressed by how stable and smooth this entire experience was. I was able to launch Cyberpunk, immediately connect to a server, and start playing with other people for hours. That's the type of experience I know many of us have been hoping for, and yeah, it exists right now. This isn't something that's years away. I just played this a couple of months ago. And thankfully, in some of the more recent tests with the more updated version of CyberMP, even more features are added in, as well as many more bugs resolved. On this recent TDM test with a 2v2, player animations were partially implemented, so being able to actually see other players walk around really does make a gigantic difference, as you could tell from this gameplay. And you can see in this gameplay, the player-to-player sync is nearly perfect. There's almost no glitching whatsoever, and considering it's a fan-made mod, for me, this is about perfect. I honestly don't expect much more than this. What I think is going to be even more exciting for many of you is some of the recent testing around mods and Cyberpunk multiplayer. And this is going to be really handy in 2 ways. One, CyberMP has functionality to unload player mods when you connect to a server. So some players will have their mods disabled as to not get an upper hand as they're connecting to your server. But also with downloading mods, as now you can download content from the server while connecting to it. So you can see here, a recent test had some custom cars uploaded to the server, and as users joined, those cars were downloaded to be used by them. Full-on modded Cyberpunk multiplayer is coming. And yeah, this is the time to get real excited for all of this because I think this looks fantastic. One of the big questions I'm sure many of you are wondering right now is around quests. Will CyberMP have a quest sync system? And the answer to that is unfortunately no. CyberMP is not meant to be a co-op mod for Cyberpunk 2077. It's actually very much so not intended to be a co-op mod, but more so like GTA Online. It's meant to be a server hosting software so you can create your own specific experience on a server. I wouldn't be shocked if down the line some degree of quest or co-op functionality could come, but at least as of right now, it's not the priority and really not being worked on. And if you're interested in jumping into one of these future tests for yourself, check out the CyberMP Discord server, which I'll have linked down below. The author behind this mod has already been working on it for years just by himself, and he does have a Patreon, which I'll also have linked down below, so consider supporting. And overall, I just gotta say, I have been blown away by this one. I've been covering this mod since 2021, but actually getting to play it myself, this felt amazing. The amount of progress made in this mod in just a few short years from literally one person is remarkable. There's currently no release date, but with how good some of the recent tests are looking, you have to imagine the release can't be that far away. But otherwise, check out this video, because official mod tools may be coming to Cyberpunk 2077 sometime soon.